Welcome, all pregnant families, midwives or birth workers. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we will be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. In this session, I'm going to help you to understand a little bit about how the pregnant brain changes, preparing us for motherhood and to meet the needs of our children. These changes last a lifetime and is definitely an upgrade to the system, not that it always feels that way. This information has come from a book by neuroscientist Dr. Sarah McKay, Baby Brain: The Surprising Neuroscience of How Pregnancy and Motherhood Sculpt Our Brains and Change Our Minds for the Better. Enjoy.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. Most of the stories you will hear through this podcast are graduates of the Transform Your Birth workshop held in Canberra. Our Transform Your Birth Today course is now available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and includes all the wonderful wisdom of this course and live weekly catch-ups when you need it with our host, Tracy. For a little taste, please accept our pregnancy gift offer, which contains free the first few lessons and some essential wisdom for pregnancy. The link can be found in these show notes or visit transformyourbirth.com.au. And now for the episode.
Hello everyone, it's Tracy with you again this week, and today I thought I'd give a little bit of a talk about baby brain. We often tease pregnant women about their baby brain, but I've got some really good news for you today. Our brains change, and not for the worse, but for the better. Have you noticed that since being pregnant? Have you noticed you struggle to remember things? Have you noticed that you put your keys in the fridge and things like that? Don't you worry, Mother Nature's setting you up. So what happens when we get pregnant is that our brain does start to change. We change physically, obviously, socially, behaviourally. Our priorities change, our relationships change, and our brain changes. Now, the first thing that we need to appreciate is that our memory is affected. We're not supposed to be thinking and doing. Okay? We're being primed to start to feel more, to create an empathic link with that baby. And so what that means is that we need to start to let go of those less important things. It's hard, particularly later in pregnancy when you want to go nesting. And we think nesting is cleaning things you normally wouldn't clean. Your care factor at work has dropped. Even work that you've been really passionate about in the past, all of a sudden it just isn't as shiny anymore. And you want to potter around at home and do little things, and you don't want people ringing you or hassling you. That's part of what's being primed for you to get ready to attune to your baby. In our modern culture, we have this archetype of the super mum. Oh, she can do this. She can look great. She cooks, food from scratch. She looks after the kids. They're clean. The house is tidy. Oh, super irritating. We're not meant to be a super mum. We're meant to be more in a state of being. Now, something else happens in the brain is you've got this amygdala, which is the part of your brain that registers threat. And that amygdala grows, gets bigger. And why do you think that is? I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's there to make us more protective and hypervigilant around that baby. It's there to make us fierce. Okay, and I love this. That hypervigilance is there to protect our newborn who has very high needs and is highly vulnerable for a very long time. Now, one of the things that can happen is we feel a bit anxious when we have our babies around people, even people we know and love, holding the baby or taking the baby away from us or coming between us and the baby. It's a really interesting, I was shocked when I had a family friends came over when I was showing them my first, and this is very particularly strong with your first baby. And I was really wanting to show him off. But when they came in, their energy was large. There was chaos. They were loud. They were flash photography with my baby. And I lost all sense of politeness. I grabbed my baby, walked into the bedroom, and slammed the door. It was too much for my system, but I was feeling incredibly fierce. And these were really good friends. So it's interesting to watch how you're changing and to look underneath that, see the intelligence of the system and what it's actually doing. We can have very intrusive thoughts about harm to the baby. Like, for example, walking through a doorway and worried about, I'm going to hit the baby's head, and being really careful as you walk through the doorway, or not wanting to walk on or downstairs with the baby because you've got this image in your mind that you're going to fall down and hurt the baby. It's very, very normal to have those thoughts. And once again, that's that big fat amygdala priming you to protect that baby. I also remember I've always loved spiders. I've never had any fear around spiders. And when I find one in the house, I just, capture it and take it outside. And when I was pregnant with Sam, my first son, I was in the bathroom and there was this really big spider on the towel, and I freaked and killed this damn thing. The poor thing, I just went bananas. And it was that I don't want this spider to crawl over my baby moment. And then I promptly threw myself on the bed and declared that I was going to be the worst mother in the world because I'd killed this spider. So these are some of the funny things that can help, or can be helpful to understand, so that we don't judge ourselves harshly when we have these, so-called big emotional reactions to things. Mother Nature puts us in this state, and it can last for weeks when you've got a new baby, even months. And it's good to know that it's a thing and that you're not going crazy, but it will settle down. These feelings don't always feel pleasant, though, do they? Okay. Other regions in the brain are evolving, and we can see this through scans. Parts like the empathy part of the brain, which is helping us to tune in to what our babies need and our feelings, and to be able to sense the baby's feelings and wants. So our brain becomes more flexible, more responsive, and more efficient. The other part of the brain that changes is the auditory cortex. It becomes more sensitive so that we can hear our baby before they wake up. It was a real surprise to me that when I had all of my babies, it would happen with all of them, is that I would wake up just prior to them waking up. And I'd wake up thinking, can't hear anything. What's going on? And then within 30 seconds or so, I'd hear the baby. So that's how attuned we can get in sensing, and that auditory cortex really picking up on the noises of the baby. Apparently, our hormones support with this as well. And that hyper-tuned to our baby's sounds is obviously there to be able to sense which baby is ours. You see this in mammals. You might have a flock of sheep, and when the mother sheep hears her baby sheep, and she could have hundreds of babies around her, she knows exactly which one hers is. I remember going to a meeting when I had my first son, and I went to Tresillian to learn a little bit about sleep. And so it was just a day course. And when we came in, they took our babies, which I wasn't very comfortable with, but I kind of allowed them to do it because I wanted to learn more about how I could support Sam's sleep. And so we had the mothers in one room and the babies in another, and they were being cared for. And every time we heard a baby cry, you could just see all the mothers going, no. I'd go, no, that's not my baby. And we knew whose baby was crying and whose wasn't. Something else that changes is our sensitivity to smell. You've probably noticed this in pregnancy already. You become really sensitive to bad smells, but also you can become very sensitive to the smell of your newborn baby. If you have ever smelled a newborn baby's head, oh my God, it is delicious. I have this vision of my husband holding our first son when he was just born, and he was kissing the top of his head. And I teased him later. I said, I reckon you were licking that baby because the kisses that he was giving this baby were just so sweet and so, yeah, just beautiful. So our sensitivity to smell changes. And we're being primed to learn quickly. Now, this is really interesting. Our brain shows greater levels of plasticity, which means that we're ripe for learning, like toddler years, like teenager years. Our brains get reorganized, they get pruned, and then that gives rise to the ability to learn new things very quickly. So it's interesting, isn't it, how Mother Nature's preparing us for this learning curve. We call this period of time matrescence, and that's a word that's been coined from pubescence. Very, very similar stages of life in that our body changes, our hormones change, our orientation changes, and it's the same when you're a new mother. Now, let's talk about men's brains. What we know about men's brains is that they change too. Now, it's not as physiological as what it is for us, but they do change. And there's a book coming out very soon about men's baby brains. So that'll be an interesting read when it comes out. What we know is that the brain of a man who is only there for conception doesn't change that much. So if they come in and just do the fun parts and rack off, then they're not going to get the full benefit of the gift of that baby in more ways than one. And what we know is that the more involved they are with the baby and the children, the more we see the differences in their brains. What we know is that gay dads, even though they don't go through the physiological process of giving birth in a very short time, particularly the one who takes on primary care role, their amygdala grows. Okay, so not only is it physiological, it's environmental. And so they're becoming hypervigilant, and that applies to all dads. The more involved they are with the baby, the more their brain changes. And I imagine that's obviously true for female partners as well. So it's interesting to look at some of these structural changes that happen in the brain. You know, there are scans, there's studies that have shown that they can very accurately identify a brain of an elderly person and be able to identify whether they've been pregnant and had a child. Isn't that interesting? So it's a permanent change. It's not like it goes back to normal once the baby gets a bit older. It actually does change the structure of the brain, and they can identify very, very accurately a brain that has been in a body that's given birth and raised a child. Now, it is a bit hard to tease out the difference between pregnancy and not raising the child, and raising the child, but we can see those differences, and I think that's really interesting. So what does Mother Nature want then? What does activating our potential as a new parent really look like? Well, number one, she wants us to become fierce, enough to protect this baby. If you've ever looked at other people's baby and you haven't really thought much about it and you think, it's a funny looking little thing, you're not feeling that connection. There's a reason for that. They aren't your baby. When people say it's your baby, it's game on. And it's true. It's very different when it's your own baby. She wants us to be able to read our baby's cues and to learn fast so the child survives. She wants us to find our voice and to use our voice as an advocate for this baby. It's really interesting. In labour, women often make very primal sounds. And I believe that's the roar that's being developed, the part of us that can be fierce. As mothers, we need to advocate for our babies and not just be good girls, like we've often been conditioned to be, but to become more fierce. I had a really interesting experience of this when I was, and I think it was one of the first times I really lost it, like in a seriously fierce way, when my second son was only very, very little, and we were traveling, we were staying with family, and my family got gastro. And I was worried about him dehydrating, so I took him to the local hospital. When I got there, the doctor was very interested in checking up my vaccination schedule, and I had chosen to delay some of the vaccinations at that point. And all he wanted to do was give me a dressing down for not being up to scratch on my vaccination schedule. And I kept saying to him, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about my son's gastro. And I said it calmly 3 times, and he continued to push through. I don't know what his intention was, whether it's to make me feel guilty, but I wasn't buying into it. And then I lost it. And I looked to the nurse. I said, please remove this person. They are not listening to what I'm asking for. Get me a proper doctor, please. This one is not enough. And I absolutely spat the dummy. I was not going to be told by somebody else that I wasn't caring for my child. So those moments in time where we do have to be the advocate, we do have to take responsibility for the decision making, and we need a voice in order to make it very clear who's the boss of this baby. Mother Nature also wants us to fall in love. In birth, we can access the highest levels of oxytocin in our whole lives. We're being primed, particularly just before that baby lands, to fall in love. I believe she's expanding our capacity to love. And this isn't just for the baby. I think it can extend to other people as well. I certainly know as a mother, an older mother now, my children are almost fully grown up, that I have a great deal more empathy and understanding for people, and I don't judge people on face value. There's always a story under some of their behavior, and you learn that being a parent. She also wants us to build our stamina and our resilience in order to meet the needs of a newborn, because this takes work. It takes work to look after a newborn. We have to get up 2 or 3, maybe even more times at night to support the needs of this baby. And so the beautiful thing about this is that every child is going to push you to your limits. And just when you think you've reached the edge of your existence, you find that there's still more in the tank, because there has to be. The stakes are way too high. You cannot get off the bus. You can't put these babies back. They are forever in your heart. So we have to, by its nature, keep stepping up, keep stepping up, keep stepping up. The more you do this, the easier it gets. It's like exercise. It's building your muscle of stamina to keep showing up for your children. And I've certainly noticed that. I've had 4 children, and each time there's this ability to just roll with it. Don't overthink it. Don't focus on the hard. Just do what you've got to do to get the job done. The other thing, and I think this part is sometimes hard to take, is Mother Nature wants to humble us. She wants to bring us to our knees, to bring to the surface the old patterns of behavior that will not serve us as a mother. Okay? I think birth starts this process. We often get to the edge of ourselves during birth where we want to get off the train and we can't. And we have to push through. We have to see it through. And then the needs of a newborn are very demanding, and we have to keep pushing through and seeing it through. And sometimes we can collapse. We can declare that we're just not up for this. We feel our own vulnerability. We feel our own sensitivity very distinctly. And what she's trying to do is to help by shattering the old self. She's trying to help us emerge into a bigger version of ourselves. And she's going to help us to bring those old wounds to the surface, particularly as your children get older. They trigger us. And what they're doing is they're showing us what are the parts of us that need to be developed, matured, overcome, even healed. For me personally, in my first couple of children, and my third one really pushed me to the edge, is I was operating on patterns and these were lifelong patterns where I have to do things myself. I was an only child. My parents were very young. They had a lot going on. And so I learned very young that I have to do things myself and I have to get it right. And so that's what I came to motherhood with, that program. And by the time I had my third son, I blew a fuse, and I had to absolutely let go of the need to do it myself, to ask for help, to be okay with the fact that I wasn't coping, to be honest about what my own needs were, to even discover what my own needs were. So that pattern of being was not going to cut it with the more children that I had. And so ultimately, I had to overcome that. I had to recreate my inner landscape in a way that was much healthier for me to be able to raise, with the support of my husband, obviously, to raise these 4 beautiful boys. So ultimately, Mother Nature wants us to upgrade the system. I was sharing this session, these teachings with my village, and I was talking to one of the mothers about it, and she's just gone back to work, and she said, that's so true. Since being back at work, I don't muck around. I'm better at my work before I had the baby, and I'm really, really productive. And it was really interesting to explore this idea that baby brain is actually an upgrade, not a downgrade, because it can feel like a downgrade because we forget things. Our memory goes a little bit AWOL for a while. It can also feel like a loss of self because we can't think the same way. We're not doing things in the same way, but it isn't a loss of self. It's an expansion of self in so many ways. There is loss there, though, and the loss is this. It's the loss of a former life. So I hope this little session has been inspiring to help you to realize how precious this time is and how important it is for us to appreciate Mother Nature's blueprint. There's always an intelligence to the system. And I'm even discovering that now as a menopausal woman. There's always an intelligence to the process our bodies take us through. And sometimes our bodies need help and we need to help ourselves get back into balance. But ultimately, there's an intelligence to the system. So have a great week. I'm going to be back with you next week with some more goodness. And that will be about doing the inner work to prepare for motherhood. Lots of love to you, and I'll see you again. Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. This episode has been brought to you by Transform Parenting, an organisation that provides courses, coaching and community from pregnancy through to the first 7 years of a child's life. It is a place where you can learn, get support and grow into your role as a parent. Why not take advantage of a special gift for all pregnant women at transformyourbirth.com.au. Or if you have children, we have a gift for parents also.